So depending on how you count, Nitish Kumar and the BJP have separated ways at least 3 times. This could be the 4th. Is a massive political upheaval on the cards in Bihar, or will the BJP be able to placate its sulking ally? Joining me for what promises to be a fascinating political discussion, some of the sharpest political minds in our country. I want to start by introducing Rajdeep Sardesai, who's been dialing the phone and getting all the information from Bihar. Our National Affairs Editor Rahul joins us, as does Manisha Priyam. She comes from the state, understands its people and its politics very well. Sanjay Kumar again, at CSDS, comes from Bihar, loves talking about Bihar politics. We've got Ratan Sharda with us, author, analyst. And last but not least, representing the JDU, we have Love Kumar. The BJP wants to see what happens tomorrow before they comment officially on this. They're hoping that there will be some kind of a last-minute rapprochement. Rajdeep, I'll start with you. Is Nitish Kumar, we just heard Chirag Paswan called him Kan, somebody's calling him Paltu Chacha. Is he going to do another Paltbazi?
Look, with Nitish Kumar, you never know till the last minute which way he goes. As you said, barring a last-minute rapprochement, it appears that Nitish Kumar is slowly but surely moving away from the BJP and exploring his options outside the BJP. I want to put this in 2 contexts. One is, if you look at Nitish Kumar's political career, you see, unlike the other Mandal socialist leaders, Nitish Kumar has 2 differences. One, he doesn't carry the liability, some would say, of being a dynastical politician. You know, he hasn't built a dynasty around him like other Mandal socialist politicians have. Number 2, he doesn't have the asset that other Mandal politicians have, which is a very large caste base. At the end of the day, the Kurmis are not as large and powerful as the Yadavs are. Therefore, Nitish on his own can never win an election in Bihar. So his entire career has been based on dependency and political positioning.
Why is he upset at this moment, according to you?
See, that is unclear what is the exact trigger, beyond the fact that the BJP now is the dominant expansionist party of Bihar and India. That's where it comes from. We saw it in Maharashtra. Why is then Uddhav Thackeray or the Shiv Sena upset with the BJP? Because the BJP was encroaching slowly but surely on the turf of the Shiv Sena. Why is Nitish Kumar upset? Because slowly but surely, and we saw it in the 2020 elections, the entire dynamics between the 2 parties have changed. In 2010, Nitish was the dominant party, the BJP was party number 2. In 2020, it was very clear, BJP was now the party number 1 and Nitish was party number 2. And we are seeing this across the country now. Look at it in every state where the BJP was a junior partner. I can even talk of my small home state of Goa, where the NGP was completely destroyed eventually by the BJP. Is a rump now. The fact is, I think Amit Shah in the last 2 years in particular has tried to develop a new generation BJP leadership in Bihar, a leadership which in a way wants to dominate, or which he hopes will dominate Bihar politics over the next 20 years. The leadership that Nitish Kumar grew up with was from the Vajpayee era, and we can even go back to the 1970s when they were all student leaders, the likes of Sushil Kumar Modi, Nand Kishore Yadav. These were all people who grew up with Nitish Kumar. So Nitish Kumar had a comfort factor with them. Now comes Amit Shah, who, like in Maharashtra, has decided that the BJP must assert its sort of dominant national position in every state.
But and that's a bit unfair in various ways from the BJP's perspective, Rahul Srivastava, because the BJP, despite having many more MLAs than the JDU, actually made Nitish Kumar Chief Minister. Amit Shah and JP Nadda both as recently as last week said that Nitish Kumar continues to be our Chief Minister. We'll fight 2024 under his leadership. Therefore, the BJP actually thinks they've been very accommodative, over-accommodative towards the JDU. Why then is Nitish upset? And is your information as the same as Rajdeep's, that Nitish is almost certain to jump ship?
You see, if you see the comments which have come, Rajdeep, Rahul, from the JDU camp, say for example, Rajiv Ranjan, that is Lallan Singh, saying, Nitish ka kad chota kiya gaya, Chirag model tiyar kiya gaya hai. What happened to Chirag Paswan? The father passes away, Chirag Paswan wants more because of his rivalry to Nitish Kumar. He moves away from the BJP, eventually loses all his MPs. Now, this is what the JDU is saying on the surface. But I think what problem for Nitish Kumar is, and the BJP is, that the BJP is still saying we are ready to back Nitish Kumar in the next Lok Sabha election, go under him, and in the next elections, primarily because of the caste equations, Rahul. The BJP created two leaders as Deputy Chief Minister, Tarkeshwar and Ramadevi. The idea was to dent at that EBC vote that Nitish commands. Rajdeep is right when he says he doesn't have a large chunk, but since 2010, Nitish, through his political maneuvers, has created a very sizable vote bank among the EBCs, which nobody else has. Lalu Prasad Yadav doesn't have it, BJP doesn't have it, and in that, this EBC is 32% of Bihar population. Now that EBC makes Nitish a very, very pivotal factor.
Nitish seems to have been worried that BJP could use RCP Singh to do a shinde on him. Is that a legitimate fear? Because RCP Singh doesn't have the kind of ground presence that Shinde did in a place like Thane.
See, I think Nitish and the JDU is worried that since 2018, they have seen the BJP go in a predatory mode against rivals as well as allies, ex-allies. Shiv Sena, Rajdeep says Goa, it has happened. You say it has happened to Chirag Paswan. So there is a sense of worry. I think the day Nitish Kumar got 45 seats and BJP got 77, it was a crown of thorns that Nitish was wearing. He was not uncomfortable with the idea. He knew next, from having more seats than the JDU, the BJP's next idea would be to finish him off and create Bihar at its own state. And I think that's what he's fighting for survival and for a future plan.
Sure, but 2024 is some distance away.
Right.
From the BJP's perspective, it's important to fight 2024 in partnership with the JDU, because remember, they won 39 out of 40 seats, and the only way to replicate that or come close is if you have a strong alliance with, if JDU walks away is no longer the case. Why does Nitish want to jump ship mid-course?
Remember that if you recall, in 2013 also, Nitish Kumar jumped ship when Narendra Modi was chosen as the BJP's face. Bihar elections were only in 2015.
But that time he didn't know how powerful Modi will be.
No, interestingly, he did not ally straight away with Lalu Prasad. That alliance took place only after the 2014 election. The point is, today, Nitish Kumar, the closer he gets to 2024, the BJP gets stronger and Nitish gets weaker. Today, at least, he can reach out to an RJD and form a government. Look, he can do something that Uddhav Thackeray did what did Uddhav Thackeray do in 2019? As he was being encircled in this pincer-like movement by the BJP, Uddhav Thackeray decided, let's tie up with the NCP.
And how did that end for him? How did that end for him? Look, he's sitting pretty. He's Chief Minister of Bihar.
But Rahul,
now he'll have the BJP unsheathing their swords.
Sure, but let's be also fair to Nitish Kumar to the extent of saying that he has very strategically played these politics of self-preservation for years. Which other North Indian politician has ruled his state for 17 years with just a one short gap in between?
8 swearing-in ceremonies. It will be the 8th if he goes in again. It will be the 8th swearing-in ceremony in 22 years.
But how much of a Teflon coating can someone have?
No, and without ever getting a majority on his own. Without ever getting a majority of his own, you've ruled a state for 17 years, as I said, by practicing this politics of self-preservation, political positioning. One day with Lalu Prasad, one day with even Narendra Modi, who you had opposed at one stage. Earlier, of course, with the Vajpayee-led BJP. But this has been Nitish Kumar's strategy over the years.
Community of Indian politics.
But where you may be right, it is subject to diminishing returns. Because I don't think you can compare the Nitish Kumar of 2022 with the Nitish Kumar of 2005.
Or compare the BJP
Then
of
he was
2013.
taking on Lalu under the guise of Jungle Raj. He had a certain moral aura around him. Today he is a diminished politician compared to 2005. In 2013 he was actually seen as someone who could be the so-called secular challenger to Mr. Modi. He's not even that. Today he's a diminished politician trying to protect his citadel in Bihar.
From what Congress sources are telling us, and you'll see this play itself out over the next few days and weeks, could Nitish Kumar be propped up if it goes as per the secular opposition's plan as a counter, as a Hindi-speaking counter to Modi in the 2024 elections? Is that the direction in which they're hoping to take things? Manisha Priyam, Bihar mein Kaaba. What's going on in your state, ma'am? Do you think that once again, after having said all manner of things about Lalu Yadav and how difficult it was to rule with the RJD and how the BJP was a much cleaner, less corrupt party to be in alliance with, and how Modi was this force their resistance, Nitish Kumar seems to be all set to do another political somersault?
Yeah, certainly. And you can see that he's made that somersault. He's no longer an ideological politician. He is about the politics of the here and now. And I can see that you've had this train of comparison between the Eknath Shinde moment and the Bihar moment. I think Nitish's anger predates whatever has happened in Maharashtra, whatever has happened in the recent past. And the Chirag model is really something else. Nitish is in fact angry since the 2020 state elections, putting the blame squarely on the BJP for his losses, for the lesser number of seats. And Chirag really was seen as responsible for having diminished Nitish's votes. Remember the victories of the RJD that was fighting against at that point of time of the BJP and Nitish coalition. The victories of the RJD were coming in the central Bihar, the first round of elections. The left did very well all on its own. So all the anger against Nitish Kumar, all the anti-incumbency in terms of the COVID anger was happening at that point of time. Now Nitish played smart, and he's had what is, you've had many of these Bihari idioms being used, but the latest idiom is that he's a rusa hua uncle, a rusa hua pupa. He's been angry with the BJP since then, that he was not allowed to play his elections to the full hilt. And I think it is that anger. Nitish Kumar waits for his moment. There's one model of politics which is called veto politics. He's played that to the hilt. He's put ideology to the side. He's done developmentalism. Now is his time once again. But remember, on the ground, in the BJP cadres at this point of time, a very militant assertion. The BJP at this point of time, regionally, it is very strong in the Purnia belt. Tarkishore Prasad represents a model of that. Apart from other castes, Amit Shah's leadership has meant that the Baniyas are very, very emboldened. That's a caste, the Vaishya caste has never had such a resurgence in Bihar. That's an original BJP investment apart from the upper caste strength that it has. The BJP has also got one slice of the OBC all on its own, which is in the Kushwaha politics. If you go in the urban gullies of Patna, I've been spending a lot of May this year in the urban gullies, and you could see the fist fights between the Kurmis living in Patel Chhatravas and the Kushwahas who claim that Samrat Ashok is their legacy and they are descendants. So a historical fight happening in an ugly gully. 3 months down the line we see that it was a signal what was happening in the urban gullies. It is a signal now that India's Home Minister, Honorable Sardar Patel, has a colloquialized provincial existence in Patna, and on the other side Samrat Ashoka. Both sides, the JDU and the BJP, have lined up their forces. Remember, when Mr. Nadda visited the iconic Patna University, where he was himself a student and his father led a very important position in the Patna University, you had the Patel Chhatravas students coming up and saying, Khela hobe, go back. And there were signs then that there was a lot of bickering between the two partners. Last but not the least, I would like to say that as far as Nitish's relationship with the BJP is concerned, he was very comfortable in an Arun Jaitley-led environment of the BJP. That's when the coalitions with the BJP had been stitched. Every time he went back, it was Arun Jaitley who went to cajole the Rusawa uncle, the Pupa who was angry, and it was Mr. Arun Jaitley who would get him back. So Sushil Modi's exit from Patna and Arun Jaitley unfortunately not being with us, I think the situation has become uncomfortable. At this point, I would say he is in the twilight of his political innings and political career, but he's also a man who keeps his hurt, his sense of hurt to himself and looks for opportune moments. That's been a very important style of his politics. You can call it good, you can call it bad, but remember, politics is not a game of morality, and this is Nitish Kumar in a different model. It's not about the ideological roots, but it's about reinventing whether the cut, add, stitch coalition with local numbers. Remember, each of the 7 parties that seemingly are said to be aligning with a JDU under his leadership are all brewed in a local hue. Whether he could be the leader or mascot for resurgence of the local in Bihar or not, or whether it could be an Amit Shah model which now has newer castes now baying for blood and looking for their share in political capital. That's
No,
the
remember,
nature of the political
BJP
capital
has
and
fought
contest
alone
that's
in
happening.
2015,
There will be
Sanjay
change.
Kumar,
There will be a
against
realignment of
the
forces.
might of the JDU and the RJD as a combine, and it came up very badly defeated. from all of what you know of the politics of Bihar, if the BJP were to fight alone in 2024, they've gained strength arithmetically since 2015. But in 2024, how is that Lok Sabha election fought in the name of the performance of the Prime Minister likely to end? Is this the BJP's nightmare playing itself out?
Rahul, if you look at the political combination in Bihar, I think we have been talking about three political parties, BJP, RJD and JDU. If we look at the history, political history for the last 25, 30 years, whichever two parties form an alliance, they have an upper hand over the third rival. So 2024, the scenario, if we look at the scenario, if all the three parties contest separately, I'm sure BJP will have an absolute upper hand over RJD as well as JDU. Look at what is happening to the support base of these three political parties. Clear signals of JDU support base declining, as was stated by Rajdeep, and if you look at the vote polled by JDU over last several elections, JDU score vote is roughly in the range of 17-18%, not more than that. Given what is happening within JDU, the support base would have declined, it would not have increased. RJD is sitting with a support base of roughly 28, 29, 30% vote. BJP was lower compared to RJD's support base before 2020 assembly elections. But given the way Amit Shah is touring the state, putting up their own people at several prominent positions within the BJP, trying to reinvent BJP, trying to have a new BJP in Bihar, I'm sure BJP's support base has gone up during last couple of years, and whatever is happening within JDU, people's trust will go down because now there's a sense that this is a party, I won't use the word it is a sinking ship, but I think there is a sense that this is a party which is on decline because there is no second rank of leadership. Given several issues which is happening within the JDU, JDU support base has declined. So if 2024 is a scenario where all political parties are contesting separately, it's very difficult to say how many seats BJP is going to win in 2024 Lok Sabha election, but I'm sure, and I can say this with confidence, that BJP would definitely emerge as the single largest party in 2024 Lok Sabha election. Had it been assembly elections.
If who Manisha called Ruse hue Fufaji were to fight with Tejaswi and with the Congress and possibly with the left, then you've got BJP versus the others. So it's not BJP fighting everyone separately. BJP would love to fight everyone separately, but that might not be the kind of contest that presents itself.
Look, then we are talking about two scenarios. One is a scenario where all political parties are contesting separately, but Rahul, you presented another scenario. BJP is on its own with alliance with few smaller political parties, but on the other hand, we have an alliance, and I would call it a formidable alliance for Bihar, which includes RJD, Congress, some left parties, and JDU. Then this is a formidable alliance for 2024 as well. Very difficult to say this formidable alliance will have larger number of seats or BJP will have larger number of seats, but I think this will be a formidable alliance, and BJP would not like to go into 2024 election with this kind of a combination where
but
BJP
we've also seen, Rajdeep,
in alliance with smaller parties,
in 2019, you had Akhilesh and Mayawati together, and yet the BJP didn't do as well as 2014, but did much better than anybody would have expected them to.
Two very quick points linked to that. Point number one, you're right in saying in Uttar Pradesh in 2019 when Akhilesh and Mayawati came together, there was a perception that the sheer arithmetic of this alliance would defeat the BJP and make it a 51% election as Amit Shah called it. The fact is the BJP did remarkably well. My belief is a national election must be seen different to a state election. Had Akhilesh Yadav and Mayawati, for example, tied up in a 2022 UP election, in a more localized contest, the sheer arithmetic of these two strong parties would have given, I believe, the BJP a bigger challenge than in a national election, which increasingly becomes presidential.
BJP's big headache right now is 2024. Right now they're not looking at 2024.
So therefore, in a 2024, even in a national election, I believe that the BJP would have a reasonably good chance of taking on a wide alliance against it, but their task becomes tougher.
Much tougher.
Because Bihar, remember, unlike UP, the BJP has never got a majority on its own. Just like Nitish has never got a majority on its own. The BJP also is not a party like in Uttar Pradesh where it has got 40% vote share and more. The first time I think that it came close to that was in 2020. That too while contesting fewer seats because it was in alliance. So the BJP's task in Bihar is much more difficult than its task in UP to take on a wide-ranging coalition against it. It would be even more difficult in a state election. In a national election, I do believe the BJP can make it presidential. I think the BJP's concern is not just 2024. I think the BJP is looking at a long-term game of gradually taking over large parts of the country where traditionally regional parties have prevented the BJP's growth. Bihar is one example, Maharashtra is one example that I can cite in recent times. Some states like Assam, they've been very successful in virtually decimating the regional party, AGP. With parties like the Telugu Desam, they've diminished those parties. Even the Akalis have got diminished post-BJP. So the BJP is working to a scenario where it believes we must target regional parties and occupy that space. In that, Nitish Kumar may have been important player for them to take on a Lalu 5 or 10 years ago. Today he is not. He doesn't carry, I believe, the same equity for the BJP, even though Rahul Srivastava is right. Nitish has his EBC vote bank, but I still believe the BJP is looking not just as 2024, but beyond that to emerge as Bihar's #1 party for now.
Make no mistake, at this moment, the BJP's #1 priority is to ensure the Prime Minister Modi gets re-elected in 2024 in style. That's their #1 tasking, and that's what all political and administrative effort is already geared towards. I want to go across to Love Kumar Singh, leader of the Janata Dal United. He joins us on this broadcast. मनीषा प्रियम कह रही थी कि नीतीश कुमार एक रूसे हुए फूफा जी की तरह है. क्यों रूसे हुए हैं भाई नीतीश जी? क्या हो गया? क्या वजह है कि पूरी इन्होंने सरकार बनाई बीजेपी के साथ? छोटी पार्टी है बीजेपी, उनसे बहुत ज्यादा बड़ी पार्टी थी, बावजूद इसके जेडीयू को चीफ मिनिस्टर का पद दिया. फिर क्यों नीतीश जी नाराज चल रहे हैं सर?
देखिए, बिहार में बहार है और नीतीश कुमार है. कहीं कोई फूफा जी और उसने पर भूलने की बात नहीं है. नीतीश कुमार जी जैसा पॉलिटिशियन शायद ही इस देश में कोई होगा. और रही बात, आप छोटे पार्टी की कह रहे हैं कि हमारा अभी वो पार्टी की सीटें हमसे ज्यादा है. आप पूरे, मैं 2000 में ले जाना चाहूंगा आपको, 2001 के चुनाव में जिस समय अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी भारतीय जनता पार्टी के लीडर थे, उस समय भारतीय जनता पार्टी की सीटें 67 थी और हमारी सीटें सिर्फ 34 थी समता पार्टी की. तब भी अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी ने नीतीश कुमार जी को नेता बनाया था और उनमें नेता का गुण देखा था. तभी अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी से ज्यादा काबिलियत रखने वाले नेता शायद ही आज कोई होंगे. और मैं आपको बता दूं, नीतीश कुमार जी और बिहार एक दूसरे के पर्याय हो गए हैं. नीतीश कुमार के बिना विकसित बिहार की कल्पना नहीं की जा सकती है. नीतीश कुमार जी ने अपने काम किया है जो दृढ़ निश्चय के साथ.
मैंने तेजस्वी से पूछा था पिछले इलेक्शन के बाद कि अगर नीतीश जी से कभी दोबारा अलायंस हुआ तो क्या हुआ. उन्होंने कहा अरे वो तो पलटू मामा है, उनसे तो अलायंस का सवाल ही नहीं उठता, बिल्कुल नापसंद करते हैं. उन्होंने पब्लिकली बोला कि इनके साथ मैं वापस नहीं जाऊंगा. अब लालू जी चाहते हैं कि वापस चले जाएं तो आरजेडी वापस चली जाएगी. लेकिन जिस पार्टी को इन्होंने भ्रष्ट कहा, जिन्होंने कहा कि लालू जी फोन करते हैं डीएम को, एसपी को, सरकार चलाने नहीं दे रहे, बीजेपी में कम से कम ये दिक्कतें नहीं है, अब उनके साथ कैसे फिर से चलाएंगे सरकार?
देखिए, अभी हमारी सरकार भारतीय जनता पार्टी के साथ चल रही है और बहुत अच्छे से चल रही है. अब कल को क्या होगा मैं भविष्यवक्ता नहीं हूं, ये नहीं बता सकता, लेकिन हमारी अलायंस है. और अभी तो चुनाव 24 में होने हैं, 25 में होने हैं. अभी से ये बातें क्यों कि आप साथ रहेंगे नहीं रहेंगे? हमारा साथ में गठबंधन चल रहा है और हम दो विभिन्न पार्टियां हैं, दो अपने अपने मुद्दे पर हम चुनाव लड़ते हैं. हमारा कॉमन मिनिमम प्रोग्राम है, हमारा अलायंस है. सिर्फ बिहार में, हम मणिपुर में कहा इनके साथ लड़ते हैं, नागालैंड में कहा इनके साथ लड़ते हैं, उत्तर प्रदेश में भी इनके साथ नहीं लड़ते.
नहीं तो अभी नाराजगी की वजह क्या है? लल्लन सिंह कहते हैं कि हम नहीं कैबिनेट ज्वाइन करेंगे. ऐसा लग रहा है कि रिश्ते में एक बड़ा खटास सी आ गई है.
नहीं, ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है, सामान्य रूप से चल रहा है. माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी बीमार थे और बीमारी में और कैबिनेट नहीं ज्वाइन करने का तो इससे पहले ही फैसला हुआ था. जिस समय 20 में सरकार बनी, 19 में जब दोबारा सत्ता में चुनकर आई, राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी थे, उन्होंने कैबिनेट में शामिल होने का, सांकेतिक भागीदारी लेकर कैबिनेट में शामिल होने का फैसला नहीं किया. हमारे राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष आदरणीय रामचंद्र बाबू ने अपना व्यक्तिगत फैसला करके एक मंत्री को लेकर, वो चूंकि राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष थे, उनसे बात होनी थी, वो कैबिनेट मंत्री बन गए, लेकिन वो हमारी पार्टी का वो डिसीजन नहीं था। पार्टी हमारी हमेशा से अपने सम्मान के साथ कोई समझौता नहीं करती है। जब
तो
भी
कैसे हुआ सम्मान के साथ समझौता, कैसे हुआ, किसने किया, क्यों हुआ?
ये आरसीपी को राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष बनाया गया था। उन्होंने, अब एक तरह से आप कह सकते हैं, आज जिस परिणाम में मैं उनका नाम लेकर उनको महिमा मंडित नहीं करना चाह रहा हूं, उन्होंने जो किया वो भुगता है उन्होंने। और
नहीं तो ऐसा तो नहीं कि नीतीश कुमार को चिंता थी कि आरसीपी सिंह कहीं मेरे साथ वो शिंदे वाला हाल ना कर दें?
नीतीश कुमार वो गुड़ नहीं है जिसे चिट्टियां खा जाए, समझ गए? इस बात को ध्यान रखिएगा। नीतीश कुमार ऐसा पॉलिटिशियन है जो बिरले ही इस देश में होगा। नीतीश कुमार के कद के बराबर का कोई भी पॉलिटिशियन इस देश में शायद ही है। मैं आपको दावे के साथ कह रहा हूं।
सर, कभी आरजेडी के साथ हैं, कभी आरजेडी को गाली देते हैं, कभी आरजेडी को फिर गले लग जाते हैं। अरे पॉलिटिकल क्रेडिबिलिटी, विश्वसनीयता भी तो कोई चीज होती है सर।
हमारे लिए बिहार की 13.5 करोड़ जनता मायने रखती है। उनके विकास का काम किया है, उनके यहाँ उनके आंखों में जो खुशी और चमक है, आज जो नीतीश कुमार के राज्य में शांति से जीवन यापन कर रहे हैं, आज जो मैरिन ड्राइव हमने पटना में रहा है, राहुल कंवल जी कभी आइए, आप भी घूम कर देखिए क्या शानदार नजारा है, किस तरह से पटना बदला है।
आरजेडी का फिर से जाएंगे, फिर बोलेंगे गुंडा राज आ गया, फिर बीजेपी छोड़ेगी थोड़ी आपको, फिर बोलेंगे गुंडा राज आ गया, ये तो यादव राज आ गया।
राज है, हर घर बिजली पहुंची है, हर घर नल का जल पहुंचा है। हमने काम किया है, काम के आधार पर। नीतीश कुमार बहुत सारा बयानबाजी नहीं करते, आप खुद भी देखे हैं, आप खुद उनके साथ शो किए हैं, आप जानते हैं कि नीतीश कुमार बहुत सोच समझकर बोलने वाले पॉलिटिशियन है। और मैं बता दे रहा हूं, नीतीश कुमार को बिहार वासी छोड़ेंगे ही नहीं, वो छोड़ना भी चाहेंगे तो अभी 30 तक भी कोई वैकेंसी नहीं है। हमारा नेता नीतीश कुमार ही होंगे और नीतीश कुमार के नेतृत्व में ही चुनाव लड़ा जाएगा, इसमें कहीं किसी को डाउट नहीं होना चाहिए।
Ratan Sharda, this really comes down to alliance management. Whether it is the Akalis or the original Uddhav Sena, the BJP doesn't seem to be able to take allies along. They are threatened by an expansionist force that they think will, at some point in time, just eat them up.
Rahul's situation, whether it's Akali Dal or Shiv Sena or Nitish Kumar, are very different. We know Punjab is the compulsive problem of Khalistani agitators and the urge to keep SGPC with yourself, and that is where Akali Dal thought they will be better off. They are suffering now. In case of Shiv Sena, we know what happens, so I won't waste my time on that. As far as Nitish Kumar is concerned, purely as observer, I wish him well. I hope the alliance survives. Nitish Kumar is no more Sushasan Babu. Let us be very clear. Everybody knows it. You ask anybody in Bihar, the charisma of Sushasan Babu is gone. He has been continuously losing base. You can blame Chirag, you can blame anybody else. But if you are strong, no Chirag can take away votes. So his votes have gone down, his seats have gone down. He can be an angry Kupa. At the same time, Bhatija is no more what it was during Sushil Kumar Modi's time. Sushil Kumar Modi is a gentleman who tried to assuage Nitish Kumar, did everything as Nitish wanted. The new brat pack of the BJP, the new MLAs, the new leaders are not ready to listen to the magician called Nitish Kumar. I would say Nitish Kumar is a finer version of Sharad Pawar, which is not a compliment actually. That he can change his alliances, he can change his sides, which is not preferred. Coming to the larger picture, if alliance breaks, I think BJP would be better off in next 2 years to create its own leadership, create its own strong base, rather than trying to keep Nitish Kumar happy and get all the galis for poor Shasan that is we see in Bihar. Bihar is in a dire strait. We keep on talking of casteist politics, we keep on talking of Nitish Kumar and others alliances which keep on changing. But what is the condition of Bihar? On some parameters very good, on some parameters is horrible. In terms of development index, in terms of human development index, 55% of Biharis are going out, biggest out migration society in India today. So what does it say? It says there is no job there, there is no urbanization there, there is no industry there. Despite having wonderful irrigation, despite having a wonderful soil, it is one of the poorest productivity state. All this put together.
No, but for a large part of the last 2 decades, Nitish has run Bihar in partnership with the BJP. So if a lot of this hasn't happened in terms of economic development, in terms of industrialization, in terms of job creation, it really is on Nitish Kumar's own shoulders. Sanjay Kumar, how badly will this impact the political credibility of the Bihar Chief Minister? He seems to have this magical ability to make these U-turns without it somehow destroying his political credibility. If any other leader had divorced a party and come back, had switched sides 4 times over, his credibility would be dust. For some reason, Nitish Kumar isn't dust yet in terms of his political credibility.
Rahul, Nitish Kumar has already got a few nicknames. In the early days of Nitish Kumar, when he became the Chief Minister in say 2005, 2010, 2015, that was the time when he was referred as Sushashan Babu. He was known as a Chief Minister who, led Bihar to the path of development. Various developmental projects were initiated by Nitish Kumar. But later on, we know that the one nickname which he has been able to achieve or got is Paltu Chacha, which is to say the person who keeps shifting sides. My own sense is that there was a time when Nitish Kumar's credibility was very high, and Rajdeep did mention this is the Chief Minister who has been the Chief Minister of the state for a very long time, 17 years, 18 years, without his party being able to get a majority even once. So that was the charisma of Nitish Kumar, that without getting a majority for the party, he managed to be the Chief Minister. But I think his charisma has gone down, it has declined. His credibility, his image in the state amongst cross-section of voters has seen a hitting. I think if he shifts again, if he switches party, I think he's not going to he's not going to convey a good message to the people. His image is already dented. If he switches side, his image will get a further dent.
But he already knows that, Rahul Srivastava. It's not as if Nitish doesn't know that yet another U-turn would really mar his political credibility. And here's a politician who's heading towards sunset in terms of his age. And, when you meet him now, he looks tired. He doesn't look as energetic as he was earlier. He realizes that he's really heading towards his sunset years. And yet, if he does it, shows how frustrated he is in that partnership with the BJP.
Absolutely. I think, Rahul, Nitish Kumar plays for the clear and imminent danger. He does not, I think he's always playing for the next game. Now, if you see the last assembly results, it's very clear that Nitish Kumar's popularity is going down. Next time there is assembly elections, there will be anti-incumbency higher against him than what it was in the last elections. Tejasvi Yadav with a Muslim Yadav vote has emerged as a leader. Lalu is still a force. The BJP is on an expansionist trend. In that, the space for Nitish is shrinking. Now, what he is doing today is trying to safeguard himself. See, for example, the RCP Singh instance. He has acted against one of his most loyal men to ensure that he does not become the Eknath Shinde of Bihar. That's the only reason. Now, can RCP Singh do a Eknath Shinde? No, not very easy. Even if the BJP is standing behind it, perhaps there could be a chance. He's a Kurmi leader. But there is no possibility. So he has acted before RCP Singh could have threatened him. I think he is trying to strengthen himself whatever is left. He knows he can tackle a Tejasvi Yadav much better in government. See, it's very funny. What I'm being told is that everything has to happen in the next 2-3 days. Because the Sawan Mahina is ending by the 12th. After that it is Bhadra. So in that inauspicious period, nothing happens. And the Lalu Yadav family is extremely superstitious. Now, look at what the plot which is coming to us, and what off-record people are saying, is that till June, Nitish wants to continue as Chief Minister.
June next year, 2023.
And then he wants to, he could vacate the seat for Tejasvi and then look forward for becoming an opposition consensus
Become
choice.
Convener of
Very
the UP.
difficult, Rahul, because a Mamata Banerjee and a unicorn like Arvind Kejriwal are not going to allow that space. But there is a plot, definitely. He thinks that he's still there. I don't think he's likely to contest the next election because his space would have been totally eroded by the time it's next election. The BJP wanted him around because the BJP failed to create a leader. Nityanand Rai is not a leader. Sushil Modi is out. You see, the BJP has removed all the pro-Nitish men. All those who are around today are targeting him. The Amit Shah is controlling the ministers. They are aggressive. So there is Nitish realizes that there is a pincer-like movement against him from all directions. So he's playing for the clear and present danger in which he wants to secure his party and perhaps play out for 2024.
Okay, you've heard different sides. We, at this moment, need to watch what happens in that big Janata Dal United meeting tomorrow. Will they make their intent clear? Remember, the window of opportunity is very small, because as Sawan gets over and the inauspicious month starts, there will be no political movement. This is just the way things are. They will not want to move after the 12th. Therefore, if they have to move, they would like to move before that. So there's a lot to be done, and let's see what Nitish Kumar ultimately decides to do. Remember, efforts are still underway to try and win Nitish Kumar over through the likes of Dharmendra Pradhan, who's been in charge of Bihar, the BJP making an effort to ensure that this political catastrophe doesn't happen. They don't want Nitish Kumar to walk, but the Chief Minister at this moment seems quite irritated. We'll track what happens. I want to thank our guests for joining us, and I want to show you this report on the history of the relationship between Nitish and the BJP, which has been a very, very complicated relationship. And every time Nitish Kumar has been hit with a problem, he seems to take a different turn. If he breaks up with the BJP this time, it will be the 5th instance of him changing political tracks. Here's a timeline of the various twists and turns of this tumultuous alliance.
Nitish Kumar took oath as Bihar Chief Minister for the first time in the year 2000. But the journey was short-lived. The National Democratic Alliance could not prove majority in the 324-member House, and he was forced to resign in few days. In October 2005, Nitish Kumar this time led the NDA to victory in Bihar. Taking oath for the second time, the JDU won 88 seats and its ally, the Bharatiya Janata Party, won 55, crossing the majority mark of 122 in a curtailed 243-member House after Jharkhand was formed. In 2010, NDA had a good run yet again, a landslide majority, after a remarkable 5-year rule with Nitish earning the title of Sushasan Babu. The ruling alliance won a whopping 206 assembly seats in a 243-member strong House. JDU clinched 115 seats out of 141 contested, while the BJP grabbed 91 out of 102 seats contested. But the 17-year-old alliance with the Bharatiya Janata Party ended in 2013, when Nitish Kumar left the NDA alliance, after Narendra Modi was appointed as chairperson of the BJP's Lok Sabha Election Campaign Committee. In 2015, Bihar Assembly elections brought a paradigm shift in Bihar politics as Nitish Kumar formed the Mahagathbandhan with the Congress Party and Lalu Prasad Yadav's Rashtriya Janata Dal, the party against which Nitish had emerged initially. Interestingly, Kumar's JDU was pushed to second position as RJD emerged as the single largest party, winning 80 seats, though Nitish Kumar managing to yet again become the Chief Minister for the 5th time. But this alliance could not last. In 2017, the Janata Dal United left the Mahagathbandhan government of Bihar, citing corruption charges against Lalu Prasad Yadav, and again joined the NDA in August. Cut to 2020 assembly elections in Bihar. JDU and the Bharatiya Janata Party again fought elections together along with the smaller parties. The Bharatiya Janata Party won 74 seats, but the JDU won only 43. Nitish Kumar faced a massive anti-incumbency of 15 years, but was hopeful to ride on Modi wave and with the help of smaller parties. 2 years on, Nitish Kumar is at crossroads once again. Will he split with the BJP and go back to his rival, Lalu Prasad Yadav? Bureau Report, India Today.